Before I begin, I want to say that all the incidents shared here are real and collected from many people. Some events may seem small, some big, and some unusual that is completely natural. I am telling the story exactly as I collected it. I am starting with the first story. A government official was staying at a remote rest house in a tea garden in a mountainous area. Late at night, he was jolted awake by a loud commotion, clattering plates, wild laughter, and the sound of many people feasting in the dining hall. Angry, he opened his door to tell them to be quiet. But the moment the door creaked open, the hall went dead silent and pitch black. The noise had vanished instantly. As his eyes adjusted to the dark, he saw a woman sitting directly on top of the dining table. She was hunched over, her back toward him. He could hear the wet, rhythmic sound of her chewing something soft. He whispered, "Who are you?" The woman didn't stand up. Instead, her head slowly rotated 180 degrees, cracking like dry wood, until she was staring directly at him over her own back. Her eyes were milky white, and blood was dripping from her chin. He fainted on the spot. The local staff later told him the house was built on an old burial ground, and the dead often returned to taste the food of the living. After a big argument with his parents over a failed exam, a teenager stormed out of his house in a crowded city district. With nowhere to go, he found a small, makeshift room on top of a building overlooking a busy raw market. At 2:30 a.m., while smoking on the roof, he looked down at the empty market stalls. He saw a very short figure, no more than 3 feet tall, crawling through the piles of garbage near a drain. He thought it was a poor scavenger or a street cleaner. Curiosity got the better of him. He went downstairs and stood at the mouth of the alley to get a closer look. He noticed a pack of stray dogs nearby. Usually, these dogs bark at strangers, but now they were whimpering, tails between their legs, refusing to go near the small figure. The teenager called out, "Hey, what are you doing there?" The creature stopped and slowly turned its head. The boy's heart nearly stopped. The figure had no eyes, only deep, black hollow sockets. Its mouth had no teeth, and its cheeks were sunken in, making its face look like a withered skull. It let out a low, guttural moan that sounded like a dying animal. The boy didn't wait. He sprinted back to his room and locked the door, his whole body shaking. When he looked down from the roof a few minutes later, the alley was empty. The scavengers of the night don't look for food. They look for souls that wander too far from home. A man once rented a flat in an unfinished apartment building. The place felt wrong. No railings on the stairs, half-built walls, and dark, empty rooms. He moved in alone, waiting for his family to join. On the first night, he propped his door open with a heavy bucket. He stepped inside for a second, and suddenly the door slammed shut. There was no wind, and the door was too heavy for a draft to move. He felt a cold breath on his neck, but he tried to ignore it. The second night was worse. He stepped out of the shower and saw steaming wet footprints on the floor. They were small, distorted prints leading from the bathroom to the dark living room, where they simply stopped. A week later, at 2 a.m., he was smoking on the balcony. He felt something brush against his forehead. He looked up and froze in pure terror. A woman's head was hanging upside down, inches from his face. Her long, tangled black hair was swaying like snakes. Her eyes were wide, bloodshot, and staring directly into his soul. It looked as if an invisible force was dangling her by her feet from the roof. He dropped his cigarette and ran, never looking back. He moved out the next morning and learned the truth. 3 laborers had fallen from that roof and died during construction. To this day, the building stands half empty because the dead don't like to share their territory. One freezing winter night, A man was sleeping near a small park by a lonely lake. The area was a graveyard of silence. Around 2 a.m., he saw a shadow moving near the water's edge. It was a nightmare made of flesh and bone. A 10-foot-tall skeletal figure with skin as black as coal. The creature moved with a sickening, twitching motion. The man watched, paralyzed, as the giant reached into the freezing water. Its arms seemed to stretch longer and longer. It pulled out a massive, thrashing fish. But the creature didn't just eat it. It began to tear the living fish apart with its needle-like teeth, devouring the raw, bloody meat. The sound of crunching bones and wet tearing filled the air, followed by a low, satisfied growl that vibrated in the man's chest. He hid under his blanket, realizing that in the dark, some things don't want your money, they want your flesh. In a remote village, there was a pond with a dark reputation. The locals said the pond demanded a soul every single year. One hot afternoon, two friends went there to swim. One friend went back home for a minute to grab a towel, leaving the other alone. When he returned, he saw a woman emerging from the middle of the pond. She wore a single, soaking wet white traditional dress. Her long hair covered her face. Without a sound, she reached out with unnatural, elongated arms, grabbed his friend, and dragged him deep into the black water. The friend watched in horror as bubbles rose to the surface. Just before the water went still, the woman's face emerged one last time. She gave him a look so cold and piercing it felt like a knife through his heart. That evening, the boy's body was found floating in the exact same spot, blue and cold, with finger-shaped bruises on his neck. The pond had claimed its life for the year. A young girl moved into a new house. One afternoon, she locked herself in her room. Her brother, worried, peeped through the window. He saw her sitting at the dressing table, but she wasn't herself. She was applying thick, black makeup, making her eyes look huge and demonic, whispering in a deep, gravelly voice. The next night, the house was filled with the overwhelming scent of rotting jasmine. Suddenly, the sound of rhythmic anklets began to echo through the halls. Through the keyhole, they saw the girl dancing. She moved with impossible speed, her body twisting into angles that would break human bones, her feet barely touching the floor. They learned later that a famous dancer had committed suicide in that room years ago. The entity wasn't trying to hurt her. It was consuming the girl's soul to feel the music one last time. They moved out, but for months, the sound of those ghostly anklets followed them in their dreams. My uncle was standing in front of a sweet shop one evening, chatting with a friend. Suddenly, he noticed a gentleman inside the shop. The man was fair, tall, and dressed in a spotless traditional white tunic. He looked unusually handsome, but there was a deathly stillness in his posture. As my uncle looked down, his heart skipped a beat. The man's feet were not human. Instead of skin and toes, he had the hard, dark hooves of a cow. Shocked, my uncle stepped closer. The gentleman slowly turned his head, looked directly into my uncle's eyes with a hollow, cold stare, and raised a finger to his lips, making a should gesture. In a blink, my uncle looked at the feet again. They were normal human feet. When he blinked a second time, the man had vanished into thin air. A few nights later, something followed that story home. My younger uncle was watching TV late at night. The next morning, his wife found a box of sweets in the fridge half empty. My uncle hadn't touched them. The invisible guest had come for his feast. Soon, a strange cat began appearing near their water pump at 3 a.m. It never moved, never blinked. It had glowing sapphire blue eyes with blood-red pupils, and it would growl with a low, demonic vibration that felt like it was coming from underground. Some stories don't just stay in your mind, they follow you into your house. In the 1980s, there was a dark jungle of dirt paths. One night, my uncle was walking home around 11 p.m. He reached an old ritual stone platform, a ritual platform from an ancient time. Under the ritual stone platform, he saw 10 massive stray dogs sitting in a perfect circle. They weren't barking. They were sitting in total silence, staring inward as if guarding an invisible king. As my uncle tried to pass, all 10 dogs turned their heads at the exact same second. Their eyes didn't just reflect light. They glowed with a rhythmic, pulsating red fire. One dog stood up and began to follow him, letting out a low growl that sounded like a human curse. Suddenly, sharp bursts of freezing wind hit him from both sides, pushing him toward the ditch. He began to run. The entire pack of dogs was now behind him, running in total, terrifying silence. No barking, just the sound of 40 paws hitting the dirt. He reached the main road just as a military truck passed by. The moment the bright headlights hit the dogs, they evaporated like smoke. My uncle realized then, those weren't dogs. They were the eternal guardians of a place that the living were never meant to see.